In a thrilling chess encounter, Hans Niemann faced off against Alexandra Botez with a date on the line. Moves were made, strategies clashed, and a surprising winner emerged. Find out who triumphed. Hans Niemann paid a visit to Alexandra Botez's house, summoning the courage to challenge her to a match. With a proposition on the line, he proposed that if he emerged victorious, Alexandra would join him for a date. The game commenced, with Hans starting at a considerable time disadvantage of 2 minutes and 15 seconds behind Alexandra's initial 3 minutes. As the game began, Hans extended a handshake, offering his sincere wishes of good luck to Alexandra. Alexandra, starting the game, initiated with a pawn to d4. Hans responded by moving his knight to f6. Alexandra swiftly developed her bishop to f4, to which Hans countered with a pawn to d5. Alexandra continued by advancing her pawn to e3, and Hans confidently moved his pawns to c5. Alexandra, deliberating her options, executed a capture on Hans's pawn, advancing her pawn from d4 to c5. In a swift retaliatory move, Hans captured Alexandra's pawn, shifting his queen from b6 to c5. Taking a moment to strategize, Alexandra moved her knight to e3, prompting Hans to play pawn to a6. Alexandra responded by moving her pawn to c4, while Hans opted to fortify his position by advancing his pawn to e6. Alexandra, considering her next move carefully, seized Hans's pawn by moving her pawn from c4 to d5. Undeterred, Hans maneuvered his knight from f6 to d5, capturing Alexandra's pawn in return. With the game progressing, Alexandra shifted her bishop from f4 to e5. Hans, maintaining his focus, moved his knight to c6. Alexandra positioned her bishop on d4, and Hans made a bold move by transferring his queen from c6 to a6. Alexandra adjusted her queen to d4, and Hans continued his offensive by moving his bishop to b4. Displaying her tactical prowess, Alexandra moved her bishop from d4 to c3. In response, Hans's knight journeyed from d5 to c3, capturing Alexandra's bishop in the process. Alexandra redirected her knight from a3 to c4, while Hans expertly moved his knight from c3 to e4. Alexandra countered by moving her knight from c4 to a5, capturing Hans's queen. Undeterred, Hans swiftly maneuvered his knight from e4 to d2, claiming Alexandra's queen. In a tactical maneuver, Alexandra shifted her knight from f3 to d2, capturing Hans's knight. Hans, determined to maintain his advantage, relocated his bishop from b4 to a5, capturing Alexandra's knight. Alexandra, attempting to regroup, pushed her pawn to a3, prompting Hans to transfer his bishop from a5 to d2, seizing another knight. Alexandra's king advanced from e1 to d2, claiming Hans's bishop. Hans responded by moving his king from e8 to e7, stabilizing his position. Alexandra's bishop shifted from f1 to c4, and Hans relocated his rook from g8 to d8. Alexandra's king further progressed from d2 to c3, while Hans pushed his pawn from b7 to b5. Alexandra moved her bishop from c4 to d3, and Hans relocated his bishop from c8 to b7. Alexandra moved her bishop from d3 to e4, and Hans moved his rook from a8 to c8. At this critical juncture, Alexandra found herself in a predicament with no promising moves available. Hans, with a glint of confidence in his eyes, maintained eye contact with Alexandra, sporting a friendly smile. Alexandra invested significant time in contemplation before moving her bishop from e4 to c6, capturing Hans's knight. Without hesitation, Hans redirected his rook from c8 to c6, capturing Alexandra's bishop. However, Alexandra's mistake soon became apparent as she moved her king from c3 to b2, unwittingly cornering her own king and granting Hans the opportunity to mount an attack. Seizing the advantage, Hans maneuvered his rook from c6 to c4, effectively immobilizing Alexandra's king. At this point, victory was inevitable for Hans, and Alexandra's subsequent moves were merely formalities. She pushed her pawn from a3 to a4, and Hans continued his relentless assault by moving his rook from d8 to d3. Alexandra's king moved from b3 to a2, while Hans's bishop shifted from b7 to e4. Alexandra pushed her pawn from b2 to b3, and Hans advanced his rook to d2, further tightening his grip on the board. With limited options remaining, Alexandra moved her king from a2 to a3, sealing her fate with no viable moves left. Accepting her defeat gracefully, Alexandra extended her hand for a handshake, acknowledging Hans's victory. Let us know in the comments how the date will go. Thank you for watching, and please like the video for more entertaining chess videos.